Hello everybody, welcome back to a Speedrun Education Podcast episode. My name is Flash and thank you for tuning in once again. This is part 2 of the interview with the Gomode podcast team. If you haven't listened to the first episode, then I highly recommend to listen to that first before you go any further than here. In this episode, we talk more about the different modes you can apply to Zelda A Link to the Past randomizer. We talked a little bit off topic about other randomizers and, why randomizers in general are a good, unique thing to play. And towards the end, we talk about how to improve, what are the best practice methods in order to become good or better if you are a little lost like I am in order to improve in a randomizer. So I hope you enjoyed the episode and hopefully see you next week with another podcast episode. As always, try to go back to the weekly upload. But now, have fun with the episode. Goodbye, everyone. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Speedrun Education Podcast episode. Today is part 2 of the Gomode interview, or the Gomode podcast team interview, talking about A Link to the Past randomizers. We had already the first recording, now the second one. We want to talk more about a little bit more advanced stuff. So what are for example, different, what goes beyond the general open or casual mode? And maybe we should cover what open and casual means in the randomizer or Link to the Past randomizer universe first.
Yeah, so this is one of the great things about your average A Link to the Past randomizer seed. And this is Timp, by the way. Hey, everybody. So normally it ends up taking, if you're kind of an average experienced player, somewhere around 2 hours, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Once you get really good, you can start to, rely more on hour 40 as being, pretty regular. But that's usually how long it takes to do the following. Collect 7 crystals and get access into Ganon's Tower, climb Ganon's Tower, beat Aghanim 2, we call it Aga 2, but beat the boss at the end of there, and then kill Ganon. And that is usually the open 7-7 defeat Ganon goal. That's kind of and I think most people would agree, that's the regular standard. That's kind of normal mode, the basis there. But then that wasn't enough for people. A lot of people decided that they wanted it to get weirder and even more random. So we've gone from that kind of being the basis to having all kinds of different modes and different competitive, changes to the world and to the goals that you need to achieve before the game is considered complete. We've just come up with more and more of them and kind of crazier ones. But yeah, that average mode is the open 7-7 defeat Ganon, and again, it usually takes about 2 hours or so.
Once you kind of get away from open mode, you mentioned casual as well, and that's kind of slang that they used on the IRC client, and it just kind of stuck. That's your normal Zelda 3 opening where you're in the rain state and you've got to go save Princess Zelda out of the basement of Hyrule Castle and take her through the sewers to the sanctuary. So when you play that randomized mode of casual, you start with a sword as well, just like you do in the regular game. Open, the swords are randomized. And kind of give that distinct difference. When you start an open mode seed, you are starting from Link's house, or you could start from Sanctuary, wherever you decide to. It gives you the 2 options.
Yeah.
There's chests still to be checked inside Hyrule Castle if you want, or you could skip it. That's part of making your choices in randomizer. But getting past that, in those normal modes, you get inside those dungeons. In the last episode, we talked about, or I mentioned how dungeons are their own little mini puzzles. Those puzzles kind of in a mode called Key Sanity get kind of exploded out into the regular world as well. So all of your small keys are strewn about in the item pool, not just within their own dungeon. So let's use Eastern, or rather Palace of Darkness as an example. There are 5 items, I believe, in that dungeon, in a normal open or a casual seed. However, when you get to the Key Sanity aspect, it's every single chest has the opportunity to be a progressive item for you, rather than most of these are going to be keys. So I think it actually expands up to 12 or 13 at that point. It gets pretty in depth. So at that point, you are tracking chests more so than tracking, okay, well, I've got these keys, so this is how the logic of this dungeon works. It does add a different puzzle aspect in the sense of you have to manage your keys better because you may have a very limited number when you get in there, and it may require what we call double dips of dungeons, where you go in a dungeon, get an item to do something else, and then you come back to complete the dungeon at a later time. The kind of expanding beyond that, this is a very popular mode. There's a mode called Cross Keys, and that encompasses entrance randomizer. So entrance randomizer, you can basically, you don't know which doors lead you to where on the in the underworld. And I'm going to use this kind of a little bit in describing this. There's like the overworld and the underworld, at least how the game's coded. So the overworld is light world and dark world. Those are two separate overworlds. And then there's an underworld where when you go through an entrance door, you're going to be in that underworld. It could be caves, it could be houses, it could be dungeons. So with cross keys, as the slang is called, or cross-world key sanity, there are connectors that you can find throughout the game. And when you find those connectors and you go in one door and you kind of go around and go out the other side, you could show up in Dark World suddenly. So the cross-world aspect comes in there. And then on top of that, the key sanity, what we just mentioned, it throws that on top as well. So the keys are strewn about as well as the entrances, and it's kind of the ultimate logic test. It's definitely one of the higher tier modes as far as like difficulty goes, because you have to learn the logic. You have to know what does the game expect me to do right now? What does the game not expect me to do? And we talked about sequence breaks. What can I sequence break right now? And if you can sequence break stuff, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's a curse, because it can send you down a rabbit hole that you get some item, but you weren't supposed to get that yet. And now you're chasing it for no reason. So you have to kind of think on your feet with that. Do you guys, Herf, Timp, one of you want to take over for some of these other modes?
Sure. I have a quick question for Flesh. Just a real quick question for Flesh. Have you ever played an entrance randomizer seed before?
I think like a while back ago, before I even, got really more serious into randomizers, I was just like sawing, I think, Andy doing an entrance randomizer, and I thought like, this looks amazing and fun. I want to try it myself. So I think I watched him doing like an insane entrance randomizer. We can cover that later because that's like real crazy stuff. So I just was like, okay, so I don't want to go too far, so I just did a normal entrance randomizer. But what ultimately happened is like I had no idea what I checked, where I was. Like I didn't even know all entrances, so I never finished that one, but I did it for the sake of enjoying it or experiencing it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're really intense. But the experience of playing your first entrance randomizer seed is almost like playing in the first Zelda, you've got the master quest at the end where like dungeons have been shifted around. You like move a statue or like a grave, and suddenly like World 2 is down there, and in the first game it was nothing. It's very much like that. So even if you don't race it, I highly recommend just playing one, like you said, just for fun, because it's like playing a brand new Zelda game, especially your first time, but kind of every time. They're really fun.
Yeah, they're definitely a very different experience. And as you were alluding to already, for most of these, there's like different variations, I want to call them. They're almost a little bit like different difficulty modes in the game, where, as you were saying, for entrance, for example, you have like your normal entrance mode where light world entrances are shuffled with light world entrances and dark world entrances are shuffled with dark world entrances. And it's still kind of all right to follow in your head, and you can kind of get an idea of where you are. And then you have the cross-world stuff where you go into a door in the light world, and then you suddenly come out of a door or a cave in the dark world, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess that just happened. And it goes into like all kinds of crazy stuff. But just to talk about a couple of more modes that you have in your outline here, there's the inverted mode is one of the more recent ones that was introduced into the game, which basically, as the name implies, inverts the game in that the dark world is now the light world, so to speak. So you start in the dark world. You need the moon pearl to be able to walk around in the light world. You need the mirror to get back from the light world into the dark world. And it opens up some very interesting stuff. A lot of people have trouble with the early game because starting out in the dark world makes it very hard to get anywhere, because everything does a lot of damage to you with no equipment, and you can't really get to a lot of places. So inverted is a new and interesting mode, but I'm not sure how popular it is, but it's pretty crazy.
we were all really excited about it when we heard about it, but I think most of us are sort of, we tried it, it was fun, and
yeah, people were
it's
kind
worth
of
it.
Yeah,
it's definitely worth the experience. Kind of like what Flesh was saying about entrance randomizer. If it's not for you, if inverted's not for you, like a lot of people, it's not for them really. I would suggest playing it if you've been playing like the standard open stuff. Definitely worth giving this a shot just for that experience, because you never know. Like, one thing I tell people when they want to get better at the game is when you put yourself in a situation where you try something you don't think you can do or you don't think you can achieve, and then you kind of grind through it. The more you do that, the more, it becomes secondhand, especially if you want to progress. So inverted's a really good tool for that. The logic's different a little bit, but having to deal with some bosses really early on with low percent, like super low percent stuff, is definitely like a kind of like an experience builder.
Yeah, that's for sure.
No,
transferable.
What one thing I wanted to like also say when we talk about this is like, I never did a key sanity randomizer, but simply because I'm still super scared of like locking myself out in a dungeon. Like I'm like mainly scared of like Petals of Darkness, or like, not knowing how many keys I need in Misery Maya or something. So yeah, I think like what everybody is suggesting, we just do a run and see what you do, or like how it goes. But it's still like, it's still like overwhelming to think like, oh shit, I need to now also find all the keys and need to know how many keys I need per dungeon. It's like, it can be very overwhelming in the beginning, I think, and it makes sense that people, get overwhelmed by this. But you already said it. It's like, just do it because, we play video games for fun, and those, new experience can be a lot of fun. Like I said earlier with my entrance randomizer, I didn't finish it, but it was really fun to, venture through a Hyrule and, going into random entrances I never seen before. And it was really, really cool. Another thing I want to talk about, because I think it's, in my opinion, the most interesting one is Mystery Seed, and what how different it is from all the other seeds. So if one of you can take that away and explain it, and what, the beauty behind Mystery Seed is.
Mystery has progressed greatly since it first came out. When Mystery first started, it was kind of like, okay, well, you have like, you set weights. So let's backtrack. The way this works is through an API call to the website. So there are bots. The most notable one is Sahasrara bot, which is kind of like modeled after one of our characters or NPCs inside the game. So you feed it a file, or a preset, as it were, and you can make presets based off of files. They're a .ymal. Yeah, I said that right. File. And it has weights in it. So like percentages of things that could pop up. So it kind of started as, like, is it open? Is it inverted? Is it standard? Those types of starts, or casual instead of standard. Is it a retro mode where, you have a rupee bow? Is it key sanity?
How many crystals do you need to collect?
Right. Yeah. Is it only 4 crystals to open Ganon's tower and 7 to beat Ganon potentially? Those are things that kind of pop up. And now, I mean, I'll be honest, there's a little mini side tournament that's going on where I feel like you need a PhD to completely understand the weights of the mystery, because it's got like 6 different layers of subweights that it rolls some weights and then it pulls from the subweights. It's crazy. So now, I mean, we have the options with customizers. So the devs have been super cool about this, and the community's loving it. You don't know your goal when you start the game, and like you boot up the game and all of a sudden, hey, there's boots in my inventory and my character's holding a sword, but I haven't played yet. So you start the game, you have a sword and you have boots, which is, who doesn't want the boots and Link to the Past, because you get to run fast. And then on top of that, it's like, whoa, the flute's in my inventory too. Or so I can and it's active. I could just flute away from Link's house as soon as I start. Like, that's kind of part of the mystery. Mm-hmm. And then, at that point, it changes the meta up a little bit when you're playing. It's like, as soon as you get to Dark World, it's like, do I want to run to the pyramid to see what the goal is? Like, when can I kill Ganon? Is it 1 crystal? And then, or is it, oh no, I don't need to go here. I need to pull the pedestal. So I need the 3 pendants, not the 7 crystals, or not the 4 crystals I was kind of thinking or kind of banking on. And it adds for a new gambling aspect and, what runners want to do, or what they can do. And the kind of unknown aspect is what we like about Rando. And when you add a layer of, hey, we're all really good at this game, so let's throw in we don't know what mode we're playing. Like it just adds to the difficulty. It adds to the excitement, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think a very easy and basic way of explaining it is it's kind of, it takes all the modes and settings that the randomizer has, not only the modes that we were talking about earlier, but also the settings that you have in like which items are accessible and the difficulty, how, for example, fairies work, if you can even catch a fairy, or if they're all turned into bees, or if, different kinds of stuff like that. And it randomizes all of that. So it's kind of a randomizer of a randomizer, I guess. It's a really basic way of thinking about it.
If you not say it, makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you were to truly do like a random version of all the settings, for the majority of players, you might end up with something unbeatable, because it could also randomize in, like, part of that is the logic. Like, you could get an overworld glitches seed that like expects you to be able to know exploration glitch in order to beat it. So that's where it goes back to what Daaanty was talking about with these weights. You can go in and say, hey, I want it random, but not that random. Like, I still want to be able to beat it. And that makes mystery seeds a lot more accessible, because now there's even a website that makes it super simple, and I can maybe throw you that and you can link it. But you can go through and the website just asks you, like, how many crystals is it okay for you to maybe want to have, or like it sets the weights of like how okay are you with this kind of seed being generated? Are you 90% cool with it? Are you 10% cool? Do you want it to not be this at all, no matter what? You can kind of set it that way, and then it generates that YAML file. And now when you put that in the randomizer, it will randomize the randomizer, but only within those settings that you gave.
No, when I looked at Mystery Seed, I was like, holy shit, this is also possible. And then I watched like a few runs, and the first thing I realized is like, it's so cool that everybody is just looking for what their actual seed they are playing. Like, are they playing inverted? Are they playing normal? Yeah. Or like what items do they have? Is this randomizer or not? It's like so cool that you have even less of an idea what you're about to do. But I don't know. It sounds like so weird, but this entire random aspect of randomizers is like, I don't know. I find it really fascinating, and it's much more fun. I just like to play games where I have no idea what to do. And I think this adds a lot of replay value to it, because, a lot of people get tired of normal speedruns, like being always the same, quote unquote. And in randomizers, you can love the game, but because it's always random, maybe never tired of it.
Now, I want to go back to something that I mentioned in the last episode, which is how crucial the randomization is to the whole experience. Because it would be another thing if somebody else came up with what you were going to play and then gave it to you. But the knowledge of knowing that it is truly like chaotically random, like when you remove that element from the whole experience, I think it loses a ton of fun factor. And I can't even really put my finger on why, but it being truly random, I think, is a huge, huge part of what makes this game so fun, and the trust in knowing that it is truly random.
I also, if you don't mind, I want to give 2 quick shout outs to some modes that we haven't mentioned yet. One of them that you have on there, which is the randomizer, which I think is a ton of fun. A lot of people hate the randomizer because it can really come up with some very, 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 very stupid configurations where it's like, oh God, why did I do this to myself? But essentially, there's different settings for that too, but it shuffles the enemies around, as the name is saying. So you get different enemies in the overworld. You can set it so it shuffles the bosses around, which has logic implications.
Cool part, I think.
For example, everyone knows for Trinix and Turtle Rock, you need the Ice Rod, but now you're not sure if there's even a Trinix in Turtle Rock, so maybe you don't need the Ice Rod in Turtle Rock.
Or maybe you get to the end of pod and discover to your dismay there's Trinix and you have no Ice Rod.
Yeah, so, there's a lot of stupid stuff. You can slash a bush and suddenly a crystal roller will spawn and kill you immediately because they do 8 hearts of damage for some reason. So it's not a perfect mode, but it's very fun. And the last one that I want to mention, it's still in development, but it's potentially a lot of fun, is the door rando. What that does is every time you go through any entrance, say you enter Eastern Palace and you go through the first dungeon door, you end up somewhere else. It just randomizes the next room that you go into. You could end up in a different dungeon. You could end up somewhere else. It's there's a bunch of different settings and a bunch of different stuff, but I'm really curious to see what they come up with when this is done.
So these
are you sensing a theme here, Flash? We love to randomize this game.
I totally get that.
Mixing it all around.
No, totally. I mean, so this door randomizer is basically like just your goal is to figure out which entrances give you to the boss fights and ultimately to Ganon, so you can beat them with the given crystals, or like I think you can also adjust settings in there, like how many crystals you actually need, or if you need any crystals at all, because it's like also a randomizer setting that exists out there. I really like that. We have this one game, like A Link to the Past, and we basically created an entire game genre out of one game. That's like what I really, really like about randomizers. And I think Link to the Past randomizer was like one of the first randomizers who got really, really popular. But, there are nowadays randomizers for every game, even if it's a newer game or an older game. Yeah. Like all of them have their randomizers. But what I think is like cool about A Link to the Past randomizer, or Zelda in general, Zelda randomizers, is they feel like so well made for randomizer, because they have like so many different items, different dungeons. Like even that in randomizers you have like, or even that the game itself gives you multiple ways of accessing a certain check is like also cool. Like sometimes you need like only the mirror to get there, or you need the hammer or the boots. You can also get to the same location. So this is like, gives really a lot of flexibility, or it's like it's the game itself makes it so easy or so good to be randomized that it just works fine, I think.
Yeah, I'm constantly in awe of that same thing. Like we had one of the main developers of the show, Vitorp, on our podcast, and he basically said the same thing. It's like this game was made to be randomized. It has a lot to do with the gating of access, like you said, to different parts of the world and different items being needed. But it's also so cool that you can sometimes use a different combination of items to get to the same place. So it really adds so much depth to the game. And that's one of the reasons that we are able to talk about the game as much as we are and not run out of stuff to say, is because this is just so deep, such a deep game.
Like, I don't know how much you maybe know. I don't want to talk too much about this, but I don't know how much you know about OOT randomizer, and I don't know much either. I only watched like one full OOT, like 100% randomized OOT run from ZFG that went like 9 hours. I watched it over a couple of days. And what I realized there is like, sometimes it feels like, the balancing between like, I feel like, getting Song of Storm that opens like so many grottos is like kind of broken. And in terms of like in A Link to the Past randomizer, you like the things that open like up a lot are not, they're not that many, and they open up not that much. Like there's still a good balance between the different items. That's what I really, really like about Link to the Past randomizer, that you still most likely hunt for one or two items. Like you either hunt very, very long for fire rod or hammer, or like not hammer really, but for bow. Like I had seeds where I had 3 seeds in a row where the last item was always the bow, because it opens, like it makes you finish Eastern and the Palace of Darkness, and then basically are done. And in Zelda A Link, Ocarina of Time, it felt like much more imbalanced, but it's still a good randomizer, I think. I mean, it's like equally popular than A Link to the Past.
Yeah, most Zelda games, honestly,
have nowadays a randomizer.
They're pretty great for rando in general. Like just watching, I've played a couple of Ocarina of Time randomizers, and obviously I don't like that as much as, that's my taste at least. I don't like it as much as A Link to the Past, but I still had a great experience while playing it. And I've kind of got addicted to the randomizer bug, so to speak, so much as I wanted to play another one. So I saw that the Minish Cap randomizer was a thing.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
2D Zelda. Let's try that. But, I didn't know a whole lot about Minish Cap. And because of that, it really gated me. And I was like, maybe this isn't as fun. But you know what? If you grew up and Minish Cap was your favorite Zelda game, then that's probably the randomizer for you, and you're probably going to find a ton of enjoyment inside of it. And I mean, that's kind of how I got into Link to the Past, honestly, just with the rando side, is because I played this game so much as a kid growing up casually, just over and over.
Yeah.
No, I like, it's so crazy that like, I think basically every Zelda that's like till Twilight Princess is probably now randomizable. It's like kind of crazy. I didn't know, like, for example, about Minish Cap. And I knew that, like, for example, Majora's Mask and Wind Waker were in developing, but I totally didn't know about Minish Cap. It's like so cool that like all these games are randomizable.
I think the Oracle games also were kind of one of the first.
Yeah,
they seem like they would lend themselves really well to being randomized.
If you think about it, regarding the fun of it, I guess the SNES Zelda, so Link to the Past, just kind of hit the perfect length. Like the base game just has the right amount of items and the right amount of game length to make a really good randomizer. But as far as all the Zelda games goes, if you think about it, even though we've all played them a ton now and we really know what we have to do and where to go and stuff, they're all already kind of a puzzle game to begin with when you first play them. So, the randomization kind of builds on that, and I think that's why it feels so good for all these Zelda games when you play a Zelda randomizer, so that's why it works so well.
No, that's... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it doesn't hurt that A Link to the Past is still just an absolutely gorgeous game, and, it kind of hit that perfect sweet spot in game development at the time where, it's stylized, and that 16-bit style is very much... that aesthetic is something that's still very attractive right now. Whereas, 8-bit maybe a little too, retro for some people. And then you get into like the 64 era where those really haven't aged that well at all, but people just enjoy the game so much that it's cool. But yeah, I think, it still is a great looking game. It's super fun game to play, even just vanilla. And obviously I think that has a lot to do with why it's been as popular of a randomizer as it has.
Now, a few things I wanted to say, like I think you already said it, like, because Zelda is it's already like a puzzle in itself. I think that's why so many people like randomizers, because it makes them re-experience their, like, favorite games, like, in a completely new way. And funny enough, like, I watched, when I was younger, a lot of German Let's Players, like, I'm from Germany. And it's so cool that, like, those Let's Players nowadays also, once a week or once a month, they play a randomizer together. And it's like, you see that you don't even need to be part of the speedrun community to really enjoy those games and enjoy a randomizer. It's like really, really cool that it, is accessible for so many people in so many different ways that you don't need to be a pro. It's like just gives you, it's something nice you can play over a few days or weeks, even if you're not that good. Like, I mean, Ocarina of Time randomizers, if you're not, that brilliant at Ocarina of Time, it takes like quite a while. To beat one of those seats. Not only
it takes a long time, even if you are good.
It takes quite a time if you are good. But what I meant, like, you don't know all the checks, and you're not like really fast going through the overworld because you have no idea about the speedrun stuff. And it's like you can play that over a few days if you want to, and it's like totally a beautiful experience. I like that we just talked like randomly and seemingly nicely about like all the different randomizers. It's like so cool. I'm going to I'm going to play later, like with a friend, a Pokemon randomizer, because we want to do a Soul Link challenge in Pokemon. And I don't know, it's like Pokemon is another like good game for being a randomizer in a different way, but it's still a good randomizer because it adds fun to who I'm going to catch, who's my opponent going to use. Are they now going, with a legendary and stump on me or not? But yeah, before we go too much into the greater details of all randomizers, I want to cover like a final question, and like what makes like all the good players that good, and why are, like all the beginner intermediate players just beginner and intermediates? Like what would you each say is the biggest difference maker for that point? Like, because when I was looking at randomizers, I was like, I don't really have a clear idea how I would be able to become like one of the better players. When I do approach a new speedrun, a regular speedrun, I feel like I have much more of an idea how to become good, but in a randomizer, I totally feel lost. So maybe you could find an answer to that, and then we could end the episode, even though the talk is very, 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 very lovely.
So there is a competitive hot dog eater named Joey Chestnut who was asked, a similar question. Like, this is so stupid. You're a professional hot dog eater. Like, how do you even get good at that? And, completely blank, straight face. He was like, well, I treat this like it's a sport. I train, I go to bed early, I work out. Like, I made this my life. And I mean, I don't think necessarily you have to make it your life if you want to be good, but I think that same mentality of like, okay, I'm going to get serious about this, and I'm going to actually, like, even when it's not fun sometimes, I'm going to work on this, and I'm going to work through it. I'm going to practice, and I'm going to get beat a lot. You have to be willing to kind of put yourself through that gauntlet. And, I think for a lot of people, it's a question of whether, that they want to do that or not. I think it's definitely fun to be good. And I think that really simply is all that it takes for people like myself and Herf also. Like, we're good with just kind of being pretty good, and having fun and playing, within our own kind of circles against people who are generally kind of our skill level. But if there are people listening to us that want to get really, really good at this, I think, there's really no secret. You've just got to practice a lot. You've got to take it really seriously. Certainly the practice hack. I think you should watch a lot of people race, study your opponents. It's going to take a lot of time and experience. And I don't think that probably comes as a surprise to anybody who listens to the podcast. But there you go. There it is.
And I think, just to come back to something that you were mentioning earlier already, Flash, I think it's to break it down to like a very basic level, it's a good mix of knowing the logic and how the logic works in the randomizer that you're playing. In our case, A Link to the Past randomizer, but whatever randomizer you're playing, and the execution of being good at the game that your randomizer is based on. Because if you can kill Mothula on your first try every time, no matter what equipment you have, as long as you can get to Mothula, you'll feel a lot better and you'll play a lot better than if you're going in already thinking, oh man, I might die, and then you die the first time, and then it just kind of expands, and then you don't have enough magic.
Oh yeah, magic is
So, once you get into that kind of mindset and it kind of starts happening, it's going to get worse and worse. So really, it's logic, knowing the logic, and execution, kind of same parts, I would say, roughly.
Yeah, in echoing kind of what Tim said, it's kind of a how bad do you want it? And I've said this a lot to our listeners that have asked, like, I want to get better. What do I need to do? I've learned this trick. There's a lot of really small things in Rando, especially with Link to the Past Rando, because that's the only one I really can speak to of on a competitive level. There are very minor time saves that happen throughout a run that add up tremendously by the time you finish it. Tim mentioned earlier about how to walk through rooms, which, and the fastest way from point A to point B in a room while completing, like, if you have to kill enemies to open the door, so to speak, that's stuff you can get from speedrunning. And that's where, watching high level players that we talked about earlier, if you the way I got good, I'll say that is, like, I watched a lot of high level players and I treated it like my mind was a sponge, and I watched what they did. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to try and do that. I don't know why they did it that way, but I'm going to try it. And somewhere along the way, after me trying it, I realized, oh, well, I was doing this. It was much slower. This is faster. Literally, you're doing this because it's faster. And sometimes you also have to weigh out, like, risk reward scenarios in randomizers. So, obviously it's much more comfy to fight Ganon or Moth or whoever with, like, 15 hearts and a level 3 sword or a tempered sword inside Link to the Past. But like Herf was saying and Tip was saying, if you can get to Moth with just a fighter sword and 5 hearts, that could be where some major progression is.
Yeah.
And anytime you can do that, it expands your skill set. It makes you more comfortable, and it just keeps you in the zone, so to speak. So it's a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error. And obviously with Rando, you got to be willing to take some losses too, because in Randomizer, nobody's perfect. Everybody is going to lose at some point or another, and more than you'd expect sometimes too.
Yeah. No, I think like Randomizers has more of like a connection towards sports than regular speedruns have. Like regular speedruns and how you learn and practice them have also like that connection. But I think in Randomizers it's more like this entire observation part and, you know, taking individual skill of each player into count and, you know, how each player is doing something and learning from this is like, you know, much more than regular sport. Like in speedrunning or regular speedruns, you could basically just, you know, look what the best runner is doing and trying to implement this on your own. But in randomizers, it's like, what is his strat on this one? What is their decision making generally? And then you can like shuffle down like a good mix of each of their best skill sets and then becoming good on that. So this is why I like randomizer, because it has like, I think, a much deeper level of learning it. And I'm just like a very competitive person, although I don't have really often the time to be really competitive in one thing. But when I do have the time, I really just love to dive in. So that's like also a personal question I would like to ask, because I mean, it's always like this big, like, how much you want it and how much time are you willing to sacrifice it, and then just sticking to it, and eventually you will become good. And nobody's like really good because they are, you know, playing the game. It always takes time. I think do any of you have like one thing to add, or is this like a good ending? First.
I'll say, just to kind of echo, I don't want to scare people too much. So I don't want them to think, you know, you're either going to be some like Garbo newbie or you're super good and OP or whatever. I would say you can, here's what I do. I race about once a week, sometimes maybe a little bit more. And occasionally, a lot of times to research for, you know, writing our podcast, I'll open up the practice hack and I'll isolate a glitch or two and I'll practice it, or a boss fight or whatever. I believe that if you race once, probably 1 to 3 times a week, which takes about 2 hours each time, and you spend a minimum of 1 hour a week isolating things in a practice hack, you will get considerably good in not that much time. I think just by virtue of being someone who practices on a consistent basis, that will make you better than probably a lot of people in the community who don't take it that seriously.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that could be a lot of fun to be kind of in that mid to upper echelon. There's a lot of people in that you know, skill set, and it's fun to compete with them. So it's not a bad place to be, and it is very, very attainable. If I'm able to kind of be in that range sometimes, then you can too. With whoever you are.
No. Yeah, I totally get that. Like when I always like also say when I talk with people about my speedruns or my speed games, I always say like, look, this is how I did it, and when I can do it, like, you know, everybody can do it. Because I think this is a weird phenomenon in the speedrun scene, but every good speedrunner I've talked to, all of them say they are not talented in video games. They just, you know, did this and that and did it very, very long and on a consistent time, and all of them became good because of that. So this is like my general mindset of like being good as a speedrunner, or in you know, our world of video games and competition. I feel like it's like, you know, there's not that much of a talent part in it. It's like much more like how much you want to do it and how consistent you're doing it. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people like it. A lot of people don't like it. So go with whatever you like. And I think this were 2 beautiful episodes. Thank you to you you 3 guys. Every link we mentioned and in this episode, I'm going to put in the description. And also check out their podcast. I listened to it for myself a few times when I was playing a lot of Randomizer, and I just felt much more in the present of Randomizer world. Like after I listened to it, I was like much more aware of certain things, and, you know, I felt much more enjoyable. I felt much more engaged with the Randomizer itself. So yeah, you guys do an awesome job.
All right.
you guys do an awesome job. And thank you for being here, and see you all in the next episode. Goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Man, this was such a cool episode to record. Like, these 3 guys, really, really cool to talk with. If you haven't, I highly recommend to check out their podcast. As always, links are in the description. And for next week, I'm planning to probably record another solo episode, because I'm still kind of scheduling meetings and meetings with other guests I have on the show. But I don't know if I get them in time. So yeah, I will probably record a solo episode for next week. I'm not quite sure what kind of topic I'm going to talk about, and maybe I'm going to ask again on Twitter in sort of a poll what episode I should record. So if you are interested in deciding and voting for the next episode, then maybe check out my Twitter and participate in the poll there. So I know what you're looking forward to, and I know what I should record. So yeah, all links are in the description to the Twitter, to the Gomode podcast. Really, really go listen to it. It's really good if you're interested in more randomizer topics. And yeah, thank you for listening, and see you next week. Bye, everyone.